June is PTSD Month, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Month. While PTSD can affect anyone, it is especially prevalent among military members and veterans. This year, the Library of Congress sponsored From Conflict to Creativity, an all-encompassing art exhibit displaying works of art created by veterans. Everything from fine arts, to the written word, to performance art, to the crafts, including quilting.
Quilting started, way back centuries ago, but quilts for veterans started in the Civil War. The families made these quilts, and then that was their bedroll that they used when they went off to war, and then when they passed, they were buried in those quilts. So this is really an American tradition that has gone on for, centuries.
Gail Belmont is the founder and executive director of Quilts of Honor, an organization dedicated to making quilts and presenting them to combat veterans.
I thought it was good for Quilts of Honor to be part of this because in a lot of senses we heal, we're art, that's how we are. Library of Congress was first brought to my attention by Anne Marie Halterman, who is uniting us. And she said, Gail, how would you like to show how a long arm is run in the Library of Congress and show how you make the quilts? And I said, well, that'd be a pretty cool thing to do.
However, the doing is not as simple as it might sound. While the quilt tops are sewn by individual quilters at home or on local group sessions, the actual quilting is done by long arm machines, which stitch together the quilt tops, batting, and bottom layer of cloth. These machines are large and they're heavy. Getting one into the exhibit hall was a challenge.
They're 12 foot at least, and the weight and the heads themselves are quite long because you're talking about 24 inches for a sewing machine. So we talked to Richard, who runs NorCal Sewing in Elk Grove, and he said, Gail, he says, I'll ship a machine to the Library of Congress for you. And so we worked it out, and he shipped the machine, and then he was there all week with us so that if we had any problems, he was right there, him and his wife. And so then that's how it began.
The long arm machine was shipped back to the Library of Congress, as were sewing machines and quilting supplies. And then the gathering of volunteers who would work the exhibit began.
We have about 14 chapters now. Volunteers, I'm not sure what the count is now. We're probably maybe 750 volunteers, maybe. So who came from California was Val and Rick. Rick is retired Air Force, and his wife Val. So Val has gone through many years of what it's like to be a veteran spouse. And so they got involved in Quilts of Honor. And so they've done about 3 trips with us as part of our crew. And then Flo went, who her husband Johnny was a Vietnam veteran that was wounded in combat, and she nursed him for 41 years. And then we had Rita, whose husband is a Vietnam vet and also a doctor, and he was in the Navy as a medic. So she has seen what he's gone through. And then we have Debbie, who her dad was a Navy veteran, and she watched him go through many things from the early stages of when he served. Delpha's from Oakdale, California, and Delpha has been long-arming quilting with Quilts of Honor for since at least 2012. She was the first one to learn how to do the programmable quilt long arm, and she's come once a week since 2012. Whenever her husband wasn't sick, she was here every week, every Wednesday. Roxanne is a chapter leader for Wisconsin. Their chapter is called Wisconsin Southeast. And Roxanne's been with us since about 2010. And she lost her husband recently, who was a Vietnam veteran. But Roxanne's always been a force with Quilts of Honor. She rules the roost in Wisconsin for Quilts of Honor. Carl is retired Master Sergeant from the Army. We met him in 2010 at a quilt show that we had in the Bay Area. The next month we had a workshop here in Valley Springs, and Carl came, and he never looked back. He pieces. He's actually one of the better piecers. He used to show his quilts, and the ladies would all ooh and ah, and how did you make that, Carl? And then Carl decided that he needed to move to Ohio to be closer to his family. They had some illness. So Carl moved. Carl's on my board. He stays very involved with Quilts of Honor even though he's in Ohio, and he's going to be starting a chapter in Ohio.
And the last quilter, Delphia's sister, Jenny, came from
Washington, upstate Washington, but she was raised in Oakdale, and she has 4 sisters. And those 4 sisters have all done Quilts of Honor, and they actually went our first trip to DC, the 4 of them together, and it was quite interesting to see them together. And so Jenny, they've lost one sister to cancer since then, and so this was kind of a special trip for the both of them to go again and be a part of it. So Jenny still comes back once or twice a year and spends a week with us.
Add on Gail and Cindy Green, a visual storyteller, who documented the journey, and the number came to 11. Although Washington, D.C. was the final destination, the group made a few stops along the way from Baltimore.
This doesn't count as a U-turn.
On Saturday, July 25th, they piled into a giant Tahoe SUV rental and drove to Gettysburg, where they toured the battlefields and where Gail took part in the Gettysburg National Cemetery's 100 Nights of Taps program.
Here you know that in the Civil War, all those men were killed, and in such a small area, and how they did it. That started our history of the United States. To be there in that very special spot, and then to be able to, play that, legally play it, that was quite an honor. It really was.
When Gail was in the Army in the late 1970s, she was a trumpet player for the Women's Army Corps Band in Alabama. But more than that, her special assignment was playing taps at the funerals of hundreds of men killed in Vietnam.
Playing taps is such a special, it's so special to many. It's special to the veteran, but it's very hard on the bugler or the trumpet player, because you know that you are right there on the last 24 notes that a veteran is going to see and the last honor that they see. So you want it to be the best you can be when you play that. Now that's it.
Sunday, June 26, the gang moved into the digs for the week. An immense 3-floor, 9-bedroom, 6.5-bath mansion, provided thanks to Anne-Marie and UnitedUs.org.
Carl arrived on Sunday. On Monday, we picked up Jenny and Delpha, and we picked up Roxanne on Sunday. So by Monday night, we had all 11 of us in one house.
With more than enough room for the quilters, and room to organize the 120 quilts waiting for them. Chaos ensued.
You could say that. It was chaos, but it's a good chaos, because when you do a group like this, you have to get along. You have to know each other's little habits and ignore the other little things that might bug you. And because you're working so close together, 120 quilts is not just a piece of cake. We had to take them out of the boxes.
We're alphabetizing.
Then we had to get them in the duffels. And 120 is, we can only get 10 to a duffel. And then you're talking about 60 pounds of duffel when you get done. It took us a good day just to get all that reorganized and back in where we could function with them and award them on Thursday.
Those bags were heavy, and had to be loaded into the SUV and then hauled 3 long blocks to the Library of Congress and then through security and a maze of passageways to the auditorium where the closing ceremonies and quilt presentations were to be held. And in the meantime, the exhibit, From Conflict to Creativity, began, running from Tuesday, June 28th through Thursday, June 30th.
There are 35 demonstrating artists and 6 performing artists. The important thing to know is that the artists come from all over the nation. They're from every era, to include World War II. And we also have every type of art that you can imagine, and we're ready to have people come in and sit down and explore the arts with us and talk about healing and uniting through art.
I do my thing on the machine because of what I experienced, as a veteran, and it helps me with my PTSD. And the quilts that we do make are art quilts. When you look at them, you see the labor of love. They're not just an ordinary quilt that we do. We wanted to show how we heal with it also. Even our volunteers heal by making these quilts because maybe one of their husbands has PTSD very bad, and they have lived with him for 40 years and put up with that, and they go through the same thing sometimes as the veteran goes through. So I thought it was good for Quilts of Honor to be part of this because in a lot of senses, we heal, we're art.
The Quilts of Honor exhibit had 3 stations. First was the long arm machine, run by Gail stitching a back layer, batting or filling, and a quilt top together. People paused, fascinated by the programmable machine and intricate stitching.
Most of the public was like, wow, I've never seen anything like that. That's what they'd say when they'd see the long arm. And they'd say, whoa, I didn't know you could do all that kind of thing.
Next were the smaller sewing machines where people learned how to sew a quilt block, choosing their own fabric.
Creating blocks to incorporate it into a quilt to be presented to veterans. The quilt block that we are making currently is considered and called string quilting, and it is sewn onto a foundation. We're asking the public to come in and enjoy it and take an opportunity, and they can sew one themselves.
And we've had several young children come over and learn to use the machine, and they do a wonderful 1/4 inch. This happens to be one of the blocks that was made yesterday, and this gets cut into different pieces and then put together, and in this particular pattern it forms a star.
It didn't matter whether they were 7 years old or they were 67 years old. When they sit down at that sewing machine, their eyes lit up. At one moment I saw 2 big honking Marines sitting at that table, and they're both sewing a block, and they actually finished their block.
Carl Courtney invited onlookers to sign a quilt block and leave a message for veterans.
We're asking people to put a little note. Thank you for your service. God bless you. We appreciate you. And then to sign their name and the state from where they're from. That way, when a veteran gets a quilt, there may be a patch from someplace all over the United States. Idaho, Wyoming, Florida, Maine. So that's our way of acknowledging veterans and thanking them.
I come from a line of family, all from the military, all my uncles between the Navy, the Army, the Marines.
When you signed that quilt block, who were you signing for?
All of the soldiers that put their lives on the line, because I understand the sacrifice of staying away from your family. Even my best friends have been deployed over to Iraq, and so I just understand that burden that they all carry and the fear that they have to overcome in order to help our country stay free. I'm a big man of faith, and I pray that that goes to somebody that touches them and just hits them in a way that just what they needed at that moment. When they feel at their lowest point, they realize someone is praying for them, someone is there for them.
For 3 days, people flowed down the hall leading to the exhibit. There, they met the artists, viewing their art, and talking with the veteran artists, a diverse cross-section of men and women, and the art that is helping them heal. The artists and their art were diverse. Authors, handcrafts, performing artists, visual storytellers, fine arts.
I'd call myself a charcoal artist, primarily portraits, but I do other things. I like emotion. I was noticing, though, I was a nuclear engineer on submarines, and I had been out for a while and gone through a lot of things. I felt that I was getting sort of pent up with emotions, so I was actually releasing them in a book. So I was putting all my emotions into writing, and I decided that in order to really cement some of the places in my writing, I would draw them. And it took me practice, and now I've got quite a portfolio after about 6 years of practice. Here's a good one. I was feeling scared, fear. That's the name of this one, was Fear. And I was really scared for a while, and this is how I expressed it, was drawing this young boy, and I put a door in his eyes. And the door is either opening or closing in how you see it. Is the fear of a door closing and somebody leaving you closed, or is the door opening in a monster, or is it a new opportunity? In this case, I was taking a new job that I was not sure about.
I am a video filmmaker. I'm a totally disabled veteran, and this keeps me alive. I was 19 when I went in the Army. Went to Southeast Asia, went to Thailand, and we followed the Khmer Rouge genocide in '75. And it's the bug in my head. It won't go away, and I feel responsible for the slaughter of innocents. I ran for 8 years. I worked in mines. I worked on oil rigs. I worked in the Gulf of Mexico for 4 years. And I was always working, always active. Don't kill yourself, don't hurt yourself. So that was always the question. Keep yourself busy, keep yourself alive. I had a death plan. I was gonna hurt myself.
My name's Andrew Huber. I am a liaison specialist with the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. I'm going to be your host today while I am joined by two incredible artists. We've got Gail Belmont and Lewis Howard.
Each day, there were 2 veteran talks. Each artist had the opportunity to explain their work and motivations.
My name is Lewis Howard. I'm from Spotsylvania, Virginia. Joined the military in Fort Knox, Kentucky back in 1996. Got out, did 6 years, became a diesel mechanic for 18, and decided to transfer here to Arlington National Cemetery as a police officer, security guard. My ways of getting through PTSD is a way through my stories. My son, who was 16 at the time, he looked at me and he goes, "Dad, what are we gonna do?" I said, "Well, Corey," I said, "I think I'm gonna write a story." He's like, "Really?" And he looked at me and walked away. And normally, as dads think, you're thinking like, "Yeah, Dad, right. You're not gonna finish the story." So I did. I spent 45 minutes every day for 2 years, skipping lunch, writing my first book. I began writing as a way to escape the everyday mentality from go, and hearing these different ways of going about every day by being in the military.
And then it was Gail's turn to step up to the podium.
And 6 days after I turned 18, I was in basic at Fort McClellan, Alabama. And when I finished basic, I went right into the band. And part of the duties of being in the band was I'm a trumpet player, so that was during Vietnam. So I was required to play taps for those that were KIA in Mississippi and Alabama. So at 18 years old, when you see your first funeral home in Mississippi and Alabama, it will change your life. And it changed my life. So when I got out of the service, I didn't play my horn anymore because of much of stuff of what I saw. It took me many, many years down the road before I picked up my horn again. And when I did it for an uncle that passed that was in Army. And I decided I need to do that again. And then in 2005, people started giving quilts to wounded warriors in the hospitals. And I had one of those quilting machines over there, and I decided, you know what? That's right down my alley. I think everybody in this room that is an artist understands what PTSD means to them and what MST means to them. I do what I do because of PTSD and MST. So if anything, we need to keep fighting to get the laws in the VA changed so that they recognize us, because so often we are not recognized. Thank you.
From here, we go to, excuse me, table 2, and then table 3 over there. Okay. So
your crew worked with military precision. I was backstage while they were laying the quilts out, and they didn't even have to talk. It's like boom, boom, boom. They were working so fast.
Because they know how we want it. They've been through it so many times, and they don't like it if we don't get to do it the way we normally do it, because they understand how important it is to do it right. And they'll do it to make it work. They'll do whatever they have to do to make it work. And they were in a very small space, and trying to manage all 120 quilts is not easy.
Welcome to the closing ceremony from Conflict to Creativity, Veteran Artist Showcase.
Closing ceremonies for the 3-day exhibit were on Thursday. A special moment for Gail was hearing former WAC bandmates, or sisters as she calls them, perform. She was responsible for the presents.
Anne Marie asked if any of my sisters would like to play in the Library of Congress, and I said, well, I don't know. I could ask them and reach out to them, and so I did. I reached out to Susie Scarr, who she was retired, I believe, in the Army, and then she was a music teacher. So she got together 5 of our sisters, and they did a quintet. So it was pretty honorable to hear them. To play with them is such an honor anyway, because all these years, I mean, we're talking 55 years, to be able to play together and still have that bond is very special. Thank you for your service to our country. The Quilts of Honor. Thank you, Doug, since you had to wait this time. Okay, unfold them.
The highlight of the ceremony for many veterans was when Quilts of Honor thanked them for their service by presenting a quilt to each one of them.
That's going to be the bottom where the label is. Always when I look them in the face and I shake their hand and I thank them for their sacrifice and service, they look at me and I look at them, and they see that I'm very sincere in, thanking them, and they all have a hard time holding their emotions back, even though they know, maybe some of them know they're getting that quilt, some of them don't know that they're getting that quilt, but that never changes. And then so often they want to hug me. I'm not really the huggiest person, and so sometimes that's hard for me when they'll say, can I hug you, but I have to let them hug me, because that's part of how they want to honor what they've just received.
It was a surprise that I received this gift. It's such an honor to be around other vets and in the Library of Congress, where I see this as an archive, and I'm part of it today. So my story will be carried on for the next generation, so I'm very honored to be here. I was an immigrant, so I was a refugee, so this country meant a lot to me. And now part of it, not only just being an American, but also part of these traditions. So of course I'm very honored.
A quilt's very personal. It's from one hand to yours, and the notion that somebody took the time. This was not made in an hour. that somebody took the time to do it in your name, in honor of your service, and to hand it to you. It's how we feel when we put on the uniform. It's how we feel when the flag gets unfurled. It's how we feel when the national anthem is played. It gives you that sense of grounding and that sense of honor and purpose.
Female warriors hold a special place in Gail's heart. Their battles may not have been in combat, but she considers them equal to those who fought.
It needs to be said, often people have even said to me, well, that woman wasn't in combat, so why does she deserve a quilt? And I'll say, she deserves a quilt because what you don't understand is most women have suffered in one way or the other because they always had to fight for everything that they got in the service. I mean, they could send right next to the male, and the male might be getting promoted, and she's not. I mean, there was so much discrimination. Even to this day, there's still much discrimination. And most female veterans a lot of times won't even tell you they're a veteran because they don't feel like the guys felt because they were always fighting for everything.
They were harassed and assaulted by their own fellow military members.
It was the case when I was in, and so often I meet so many female veterans that tell me the same thing even today, and I think, why hasn't it changed? You know, why is life not any different than the 1960s and the 1970s? But some women were very fortunate. They didn't have to put up with a lot of the male counterparts that discriminated against them or tried to, you know, rape them or beat their door down and get into their room. I mean, you know, some were very lucky and got into the right spots and didn't have to suffer that. Thank you.
Taps and quilting drive Gail Belmont. The best part of this journey for her?
I think playing the taps was very awesome. You know, having my family there, my cousin was there, that was a big thing for me because we were raised together. And being in the library was very special. And then having my crew together, because we have such a bond. Well, I think Quilts of Honor is a very special organization because we're a nonprofit, we're all volunteers, we have no paid staff, and there's hardly anybody that has ever stopped doing it since 2010 because they see what it does for the veteran and how much it means. So I hope that Quilts of Honor will go on for many, many years, you know, just like it is. Maybe we can get some young blood and we just keep right on going, but we're going to keep stitching, even if we have to do it one at a time.